It's a special Virginia Derby Day at Colonial Downs. Let's cap the card. Salutations and welcome, friends. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and this is another episode of Capping the Card on NYRA Bets YouTube, where I go through all the races on a particular Saturday card and give you my top pick and top value play. This week, we're going to Colonial Downs for their special 3-day event highlighted by the Kentucky Derby prep race, the Virginia Derby, and the Virginia Oaks. Before we get into top picks and value plays, just a reminder, press that like button and subscribe here on NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel. We have race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, weekly programs on the Derby and Oaks, as well as horse racing news. So make sure to press that like and subscribe button today. All right. Well, like I said, if this is your first time tuning into Capping the Card, welcome. The premise is pretty straightforward. I'm going to go through race 1 through race 10 on Saturday's card at Colonial Downs. I'm going to give you my top pick. I'm going to give you my top value play. I'm going to talk a little bit about the dynamics of these races. Sometimes the value play is a horse that I think has a good chance to win at a little bit of a better price. Other times I think it's a horse that may just simply outrun their odds and is a horse maybe you want to use more in your vertical wagers and using your exactas, trifectas, that sort of thing. I'll try to call that out as we go through race to race. One of the things I'll mention about Colonial Downs for Saturday. Actually, I'll mention two things before we get started. First, remember the configuration of the track. It is a large main track. There are no turf races right now. Colonial Downs has an amazing turf course, and their fall meet will have some great turf racing. Turf is not quite ready yet in mid-March for grass racing. So they're just going to be running on the main track. As a result, all of the races are one-turn races. Whether that's a mile and an eighth, whether that's a mile and a 16th. They're all one-turn races. Think the old Belmont Park. Think the Saudi Cup. Those are the sorts of configurations you're going to see. Now, obviously, there's a lot of mile, 6 furlong races on the card as well. But even those longer races are one-turn configurations that changes pace dynamics a little bit. Now, the other thing to mention, I'll be honest, going through this card, very chalky. In my opinion, I think this is a card where favorites look very tough to beat. Maybe not always the morning line favorite, but I think the second choice is then sometimes difficult to get around. There's not a lot of races on this card where I'm going to the 4th or 5th choice in the morning line and going, I think this one's got a real live shot. So I think it's a card that will present some challenges depending on what type of player you are. If you're a player who just absolutely hates betting anything below 5-1, you're going to have a tough time on this card. If you're a player who doesn't mind betting chalk and leveraging chalk on skinny tickets, putting together a $12 pick 5 ticket, something like that, I think you can make a lot of money potentially and at least make it be a profitable day, because I think there's a lot of very logical favorites and logical horses to include and really still keep your tickets very concise and very structured. So I'm going to try to talk through that as we go through the card and kind of call that out. But if you just see me picking some shorter prices, and again, I'll go through and explain this in each race, it's not simply because I like eating chalk. Quite the opposite. I like to try to usually come up with some inventive ideas getting around favorites. But I think this is a card where favorites do look quite formidable and honestly kicks off right on the very first race, which is a $62,000 optional claimer for 3-year-old fillies going a mile over that main track. And you have a 4-5 favorite on the morning line, and that is Quantum Burst. Now, mind you, this is only a 5-horse field. So when you have a 4-5 favorite in a 5-horse field, there's just not going to be a lot of value to be had in other places. We'll get to Chrissy N, who I think is a little bit of a value play, potentially, or at least an alternative to your favorite if you want to go in that direction. But Quantum Burst for Eddie Keneally is coming back from a very brief layoff, 2 months, having last run in an off-turf race over a wet track at Fairgrounds. That was the first time this horse got Lasix, ran a 72 buyer speed figure, finished second by less than a length to Aladdin, and looked to be a pretty good runner that day and just kind of got bested towards the end, but was your odds-on favorite in that race. Previous start was also a second place finish, but a distant second place to Bookham, who won by 11 lengths that day. And that was a $100,000 optional claimer at Churchill Downs. Horse broke its maiden at Churchill as well, going 7 furlongs. And again, this horse training very well at Fairgrounds for Keneally. You look at the works leading up to this race. I mean, this horse is training very nicely. A 48-3, a 47-4, 48-2, a 48 flat. This horse is working out nice in the morning, sired by Munnings out of an Into Mischief mare. Picks up Flavian Pratt on the mount. I think Flavian's going to have a very big day at Colonial. So it feels like a very tough favorite to get around. I'll be honest. 72 Beyer speed figure last time out. And the other part of it that is interesting is this is a relatively short field. There's not a lot of speed in this race. And I could see Flavian just going straight to the front and just going, I'm not going to let you guys bother me at all in this race, and just gun it to the front and go. The fact this horse has experience going 2 turns and is now cutting back, ran well over the 1-turn mile at Churchill Downs. So I think this horse just has the sort of experience that you need to look like the 4-5 favorite in this very first race. Now, there's Rosie on the River, who's on the inside at 3-1. That horse really is going to be coming a little bit late. I just worry about whether she's going to get the right trip in a short field with a relatively modest pace for connections that, I'll be honest, do not win at a very high rate. And so if I was going to try to find a little bit of an alternative, I think that the most likely alternative to the favorite is the number 3, Chrissy N, who's technically your third choice in the morning line, is probably going to take some money from 7-2, but is at least going to present some value if you want to try to beat Quantum Burst in this race. And Chrissy N, for Carlos Mancilla, Jaime Rodriguez up on the mount. This one's coming off a second place finish as well and really hasn't done much wrong. This horse, debuted against Maiden Special Weight Company, didn't run particularly well that day and just kind of gave way. Then dropped down to Maiden Claiming Company, ran a competitive second, went to the bench for a couple months, came back to win against Maiden Claiming Company, then stepped up at this level. This 62 optional claimer ran a competitive third, 2-back, ran a competitive second last time out. So this horse has been doing some nice running here. And the other reason I like this horse more than some of the others is this horse also has good early speed. It might have the best early speed of the race. So Rodriguez could decide to really try to go. Pratt could try to sit off of that, depending on the dynamics. Obviously, Chrissy has to the outside of Quantum Burst. So those dynamics are going to be interesting. But I think these front 2 are going to get the trip that they want with very little pressure from anybody else. And it's just a matter of who's maybe better. I think ultimately Quantum Burst is significantly better. But again, it's what price are you willing to take Quantum Burst? And at what price is Chrissy N look like a viable alternative? But I think these are the choices that you have to consider in these early stages of this early pick 5. If you're playing that sequence, honestly, you could probably single 2, maybe 3 of these legs. And honestly, you probably would only have to spread to maybe 2 or 3 deep in a couple of the others. Again, talking about putting together a $12 pick 5 ticket in the early sequence, I think you could do that. Maybe get paid out $120, something like that. So you can, again, see how this all plays out. But it's going to be interesting to see this play out on the track in these first race. But let's go to the second race. And yet again, another short price favorite. This one's in a maiden special weight, going 6 furlongs for 3-year-old and up, Virginia restricted fillies and mares. And that is a very loose definition of Virginia restricted, because in this race, you have a Kentucky bred, a Maryland bred, a couple of Virginia breds, and a Pennsylvania bred. So the Virginia restricted is a very complex understanding, shall we just say. And so this one, though, Maradama for C2 Stables. Listen, C2 Stables is on a roll right now. If you're watching this, you probably are familiar with the race that took place on Thursday at Gulfstream Park between Just FYI and Gunsong. That race was won by Literate. Literate, of course, is C2 Stables. So Maradama, Safi Joseph Jr., again, Flavian Pratt up on the mount. This is a horse that came back from a lengthy layoff last time out and ran a competitive second off of that really lengthy layoff. This horse ran in debut back in March of 2023 against a horse like Acede, pretty nice horse, and then went to the bench for a while, came back, went from Michael Yates to Safi, came back, was non-competitive, something clearly happened, and then the horse went to the bench from June 2023 to February 2025. And this horse came back on the Tapeta down at Gulfstream Park, ran a competitive second, nearly got there, and was even a little slow out of the gate. I think Flavian's up now, taking over for Luis Saez. This one's going to be out of the gate fast due to that inside post position, I think. C2 is on such a roll right now. This horse has been training beautifully, 47-3 bullet work on March 7th, first to 51. So it feels like this one, again, a short field of only 6. So you don't have a lot of alternatives here. And I could see people going, 5-2. What value play is 5-2? Well, again, it's how do you beat the favorite more than anything else. If you don't want to take a 4-5 price on this horse, I understand. The issue is there's really only 2 other options outside of the 5-2, and they're both gun runners, which is interesting. You have the number 3 Contra and the number 5 Ann's Girl. They both are sired by Gun Runner. One is trained by Sarah Nagel. The other is trained by Steve Asmussen. Contra is 8-1. The problem is Ubu, who is the mare, is 0-3 with first-time starters. And not just 0-3 winning, 0-3 even hitting the board with first-time starters. And Nagel herself doesn't have great first-out stats and maiden special weight stats. So it doesn't give you a lot of confidence that 8-1 that horse is going to get the job done. Now, Asmussen obviously has better numbers first time out and better numbers maiden special weights. But the mare of that one is even worse. 0-5 with first-out starters and 0-5 hitting the board. So again, not a lot of precocity underneath. And also, this one's been working at Louisiana Downs for Asmussen, has not really been working at one of the major tracks, which I think is, again, a little bit of a signal of where this one ranks in the pecking order. Does pick up Irad Ortiz Jr. So, maybe you go, well, Irad just is going to give this one the ride it needs and it's going to get the job done. Maybe so. But if I'm going to try to beat the favorite, I'm going to try to do it with Divine Works. And that's won by Michael Trombetta. This one's got a couple of races in his back pocket. Second back from a little bit of a layoff. So maybe you'd see a little bit of a progression from last time out. Second time Lasix as well. This one finished, 6th in the Maryland Million last that she was entered in her second career start. Actually debuted up at Saratoga. So there are always a little bit of expectations around this horse that's sired by Divining Rod out of a Bulls Bay mare. And Michael Sanchez up on the mount. This one has got good early speed as well. Probably not quite as fast as Maridama. And that's the thing, is I think Maridama just gets out up front and goes. And I don't think anybody catches that one with Flavian aboard. But if anybody could, I think Divine Work could sit just off of that, maybe apply enough pressure to be able to make the move and doesn't mind the 6 furlongs. And so runs a little bit more evenly, doesn't really pass horses, which is one of the issues that I have with picking this one up top. But again, a very chalky start to this 10-race sequence. Now, I'm going to try to get a little creative in race 3. And I think if you're going to take a shot against a favorite, you can do it here. There is a horse in this race, East Boston Benny, number 6 horse, who is your 6-5 morning line favorite, dropping down from optional claiming State Bred Company, running for $20,000 on the Tapeta at Gulfstream Park, to running a $30,000 claimer, which is a 3-year-old and up restricted race going 6 furlongs on the dirt. I think the surface switch is a legitimate question mark. This horse doesn't necessarily work spectacularly over the dirt. This horse's one dirt effort came in debut and was not particularly good. This horse doesn't really have a lot of workouts and more just kind of runs to stay in shape. Irad is up, so this horse is going to take a lot of money. And yes, this horse is dropping in for the tag, but again, has been running against optional claiming 20. Now we're in a claiming 30 and sired by Puchero. We know Puchero is great on the synthetic, but again, this one's been running at 5 and 5.5 and tiring. That's the concern, is this one's been running at 5 and 5.5 tiring. Now we're going to 6 on a surface this one doesn't necessarily love. So I'm willing to try to play against this horse. And I'm ultimately landed on the number 4, Metagooch, for Robert Bales. And this one is second back from a pretty significant 9-month layoff, having not run from May to February, and is also dropping a little bit in class. Last time was running in a claiming 40 at Laurel. But I think this horse, broke its maiden at 6 furlongs and a maiden claiming 45, was stepped up to an optional claimer 62, actually ran 4th that day, was a little further back, but still ran 4th, then dropped down to Pimlico and ran in that claiming 40 and finished 7th, but then again, didn't come back to run for almost 9-10 months. And I think that probably indicates something might have been amiss there in that race. Came back to run 4th place last time out. But here's the thing. If you're willing to draw a line through the race that sent the horse to the bench and the first race back, which is a common handicapping strategy, then you look at some of those other recent forms. This horse has been running a 70, 68, 67 Beyer speed figure. This horse should improve next time out. Sired by Speedster, you think, out of a street sense mare, this is one who should like the sprinting quite a bit. 9-2 in the morning line feels like an honest price. This horse should show a little bit better speed this next time out. When this horse was in its best form, was showing good early speed and sitting that kind of tracking, stalking trip. This one, again, showed some good speed and faded what you would expect in debut. Has gotten in a couple of works since that last race. Actually got in 1-5 furlong work since that last race. So I think Metagooch is going to be a horse that could provide a little bit of value in what could be an otherwise pretty chalky sequence. Now, if I'm going to give out a 9-2 top choice, then I'm going to have to give out a little something higher for my top choice or my value play. And typically, I try to stay away from Jamie Ness horses for a variety of reasons. Ness horses, I think their form is unreliable. It just comes and goes sometimes at a whim. But if you're going to give me 8-1 on a Jamie Ness horse, I'm going to take a shot. And this one's coming back from a pretty significant layoff, but Ness has experience and has decent win percentage coming back from a layoff. Granted, it's usually with a heavy favorite. But still, this horse has run well off the bench before, finishing fourth in a claiming 40. Now is dropping down to a claiming 30. The speed figures would need to get a little bit better. This horse will probably have to show a little bit better early speed. But Michael Sanchez is up on the mount. And again, if you're giving me 8-1 on a horse trained by Jamie Ness, hey, the form could come out of nowhere for a horse like this. We know that. We all watch Parks on Monday and Tuesday. So it's one of those things where, again, do I like betting a Jamie Ness horse when they're a favorite? I don't, because they're just unreliable, and I just don't know what version of that horse I'm going to get. If you're going to give me 8-1, yeah, I'll find out with that sort of a horse. I'll sit there and try to see what we got. And again, this is more of a horse I'd use underneath. I don't think this horse is a win contender because this horse would have to get significantly faster to be a win contender. But I think that finishing, third is absolutely in the cards potentially for a horse like this. So more of an underneath play for exactas and trifectas there in race number 3. Let's go to race number 4, which starts a trio of maiden special weight races that are really interesting. And this is one where, again, I'm going to try to beat a favorite. And it's not easy because, again, we're looking at a 6-horse field. So it's a limited number of options. And there's an even money favorite. That is the number 2 keepsake for Brad Cox. The horse has finished third in all 3 starts, or second, I should say, in all 3 starts. Has had Flavian up twice, has had Tyler Gaffleon up once, had got Lasix last time, and just keeps finding horses to lose to. 61, 74, 68 Beyer speed figure, a little all over the place. Good speed, not great speed, especially because you have a horse like Rena is Fire on the outside, who probably is the best early speed in the field. That horse, I think, is interesting. We'll get to in a second for Gary Capuano. But I ultimately went to a first-timer, Brittany Russell. Listen, if you're going to play the Mid-Atlantic, you got to play Brittany Russell, right? This is an interesting horse because it is the half-sibling to Cats in the Timber. Cats in the Timber was a pretty precocious horse. Won second time out and then won another race in her 4th career start and then stepped up and actually won the Weber City Miss in her 6th career start, going 1 mile and 16th. So this was a horse that had, racked up 3 wins in her first 6 races. Really didn't become much after that, but showed some precocity early on in her career. So we're the half to that, and we're sired by Hardspun, who's always, I think, certainly a serviceable first out sire. Is not maybe, above is an average first out sire. And this one, listen, has had some nice works. You go back, look at the works this one's been doing at Far Hills, I should say, and, has been doing all right there. Brittany's gotten this one. 48-4 back on February 11th, trained again on February 21. Sheldon's up on the mount. Maybe it's a leg stretcher for this one. Maybe she's trying to get this one ready for the turf potentially. I don't know. But I just thought Belle of the Wood at 7-2 made a little bit of sense as a horse maybe you take a shot with. A horse like the number 5 Old Fashioned Candy at 5-1. That's a horse that, again, the dam is 0-2. Producing first out winners, but you have at least seen one of those horses finish second. Problem is, Game Winner's not been a particularly productive sire at this point, though it does seem like some of his runners are getting a little bit better the longer they go and the older they get, but still, he's not been off to a particularly good start in terms of his first crop production at this point. And I think that's a big question mark. Now, Rena is Fire is my value play, 4-1. It's not huge value, but here's the thing with Rena is Fire. Horse ran a 64 Beyer speed figure in debut at Laurel. Keepsake, for reference, ran a 68 last time out. So in terms of last out Beyer speed figures, not a huge difference between these two. Rena is Fire, you would imagine, has the opportunity to move forward potentially from that debut effort. That was going 6 furlongs and just tired at the end to get nabbed going 6 furlongs. So now we're coming back. We have a little bit more conditioning. We got another workout. We got a 5 furlong work in there for Gary Capuano leading up to this race. Sired by Blofeld. Shout out to my good friend Jessica Tugwell, who I know is a big fan of that sire. And again, just underrated, I feel like, and a horse that could move forward in this spot. So Rena is Fire. I thought, hey, this horse could be just loose on the lead potentially because, like I said, the only other raced horse in this race is Keepsake, who's shown good but not elite speed. And so if Toralba decides I'm just going to send come hell or high water, which is exactly what he should do, then he's got a real chance, I think, to potentially try to take this one gate to wire on a track that could be speed favoring, and we'll have to see how it plays throughout the next couple of days. Let's go to race number 5, and we're going to unfortunately get back to some chalk here and a Brad Cox Flavian Pratt horse, and that's going to be a recurring theme. This one is the number 1 Lion of Justice, 3-2 on the morning line. It's actually your second choice because your top choice is the number 4 Dettori for Brittany Russell, jockeyed by Sheldon Russell. This was a Bob Baffert horse that was just recently transferred to Brittany's care, and that is something we have seen regularly over the last couple of years, is that a lot of these former Baffert horses, particularly with Starlight Racing, are going to Brittany Russell now. Once they maybe off the Derby trail, or maybe they're not quite as good as Bob had hoped they were going to be, now they go to Brittany. And so Brittany is kind of the beneficiary of this. She tends to get these horses go in the right direction. I still think this one might be a turf horse, and so I do wonder if she's running this one just to kind of get a race in before the turf season starts in the Mid-Atlantic, but certainly finished second last time out over the main track at Santa Anita over in a race that was scheduled for the turf. So will be interesting to see. I thought there were enough questions there. Admittedly, this is a Triple Crown nominated horse, but it was trying to beat Dettori. Beating it with a 3-2 runner is not much of an alternative, but this is one who I think looks pretty good. A Lion of Justice, a $1.1 million son of Into Mischief, sired by Ever So Clever out of Medaglia d'Oro, or by Medaglia d'Oro. And this one has, of course, is the half, or is the full sibling, I should say, to Ever So Mischievous, who we should all remember as winner of the Grade 2 49er and Harrods Creek Stakes as well. Ever So Mischievous is a real nice horse that Cox has. And so he's obviously very familiar with the family. This is a mare that has produced very precocious offspring with Into Mischief. So you're expecting this one to look really good. Here's the other thing: is this is a horse that has been working out with the horse that won the Gotham just a couple of weeks ago up here in New York for Brad Cox. That was a recent addition to the Cox barn coming out of Victor Barboza Jr.'s barn. So this maiden has been working out with a stakes winner. And to be honest, when you go back and look at that work, I felt like he kind of won that. I feel like Lion of Justice won that work. So I thought it was very promising to see Lion of Justice working with such good company and getting ready for this race, going a mile, debuting a mile. Again, not much of a price at 3-2, but it's at least a little bit of an alternative to a 6-5 favorite. In terms of the value, again, this could be a horse that's nothing more than a leg stretcher. Richard Fenman. This could be a leg stretching thing, but this is a horse that's sired by Into Mischief out of a Galileo mare, making a debut in North America for Graham Motion. Victor Carrasco, very familiar jockey at Colonial Downs, up on the mount. And 10-1 on the morning line, first time Lasix, first time gelding, and by the way, only time, first time gelding. But this is one who hasn't had a lot of works coming in. but was initially down with Graham in South Florida, then came up to the Mid-Atlantic at Fair Hills and has been working there for a little while. So again, doesn't have a lot of works. Last ran in November. Maybe doesn't need that many works to get back into shape. Had a nice little gate work, 2 back, and then had a 5 furlong work maintenance drill last time out. Graham has good numbers for a start North America. Ultimately, Graham could just be getting this one a race before this one goes to the turf, especially with all that Galileo influence underneath. So this could be nothing more than a leg stretcher, but in a short field, Graham Motion, Victor Carrasco in the Mid-Atlantic, 10-1. I'll take a little bit of a shot with this horse underneath. Again, I don't think this horse is necessarily a win contender, but could this horse run second or third? I think absolutely, especially when you look at the rest of this field and what this field has to offer, which isn't much. Christmas Spirit for Trombetta is probably the only other viable alternative, and that's the horse at 6-1 that is stepping up from Maiden Claiming Company to Maiden Special Weight Company. So, yes, the horse ran well in debut against Maiden Claimers, but now we're facing a whole nother level of racing up here. So, again, willing to take a shot with the 7 and Graham Motion, who I just trust in the Mid-Atlantic. So that's kind of a little bit of my value play there. Let's go to race number 6 on the card, which is a $75,000 main special weight for 3-year-olds going 6 furlongs. And yet again, we are going to go to a Brad Cox horse, and we are going to go to the second choice again, though, which is Verifier. Your top choice is Hitchcock for Peter Urton with Irad Ortiz Jr. up on the mount. Irad could have a really good day or a really mediocre day because he's on a couple of horses that I'm trying to beat in some instances. Would it shock me if he won a few of those? Probably not, but I still am willing to try to beat him. The Urton horse ran well in debut at Churchill Downs back in September, coming back from a little bit of a layoff. Urton has very good numbers off the bench, even in maiden special weight races. So very capable trainer, getting Lasix for the first time is this horse. Still going to try to beat this one with $1 million Son of Authentic. I had my colleague Kaylee Shapiro do a little bit of a deep dive into this horse. A lot of pedigree to show precocity, very productive female family. You've seen some runners be produced out of this one. And Authentic, maybe not the most precocious first out sire, but certainly is serviceable in that regard. We still have yet to see his 3-year-old Nups get a victory in debut. But like I said, a lot of them have run well at the very least. This one had been training with Cox down in South Florida. I think that's notable. And this one actually had been training with Line of Justice in the last race. And what was interesting about that workout, if you go back and watch on XBTV, Verifier, I think, wins the workout. And then Line of Justice, who I just had as a top pick in the previous race, won the gallop out, which really makes a lot of sense for why one of them is debuting going a mile and one of them is debuting going 6 furlongs. I think Verifier is more of a 6 furlong runner. I don't think he's ready to go long yet, but it was pretty obvious Line of Justice is able to go a little bit longer. And so this one, though, is $1 million sale and was even a $280,000 purchase out of Gainesway as a yearling. So this one always must have, vetted very well, looked the part from an early age. But Cox and Pratt together winning at a 36% clip for the year and for the last 2 years. So hard to really go against this combination. And again, debut horse, I'm going to try to win with that one. Now, my value play is a little bit of an interesting alternative, which is another Eddie Keneally horse. That is your 5-1 third choice. And this one's got Luan Machado up on the mount. I like this. I like the pedigree here. McLean's Music up top out of a Bernardini mare. This one, the half sibling to Laconia, who ran second in debut on the dirt and was ultimately a 4-time career winner and is still racing, obviously. But you saw this one at least produce a pretty good offspring from Cantharos. Now we got a McLean's Music, so getting a little bit of a sire upgrade here, quite a bit of a sire upgrade to McLean's Music, who's usually a pretty good, reliable first out sire. Keneally knows how to get horses ready first time out. First time Lasix is always good numbers for him as well. You get the Axeman up on the mount. 5-1, if you're trying to beat the 2 shorter prices, Venick, I think, makes a lot of sense. Another horse that could make a lot of sense is number 5, Artist Mark, which is a little bit more of a longer price. Sired by American Pharaoh out of a frosted mare. That's humorous. But this one is an interesting alternative at 12-1 on the morning line. Showed a little bit better speed last time out. Really has only run twice 6 months apart. So now backing it up for the first time in terms of running a back-to-back race. Second time Lasix. Sheldon Russell hops aboard. If you take this horse out maybe a little bit better, this horse could be interesting and could build upon what was at least a serviceable fourth place effort last time out. Maybe more of an underneath play for Artist Mark. But again, at 12-1, at least wanted to give that one a nod and a mention within this format. Let's go to race number 7, and this is a $50,000 optional claimer going 1 mile on the main track. And again, a race where this is more competitive. This is a 10-horse field. I just don't know what to do with the 2 Jamie Ness horses, Eloquist and Just Call Ray. Listen, they could run off the page, they could and run off the screen, or they could run, finish 20 lengths up the track. Ness's form is just so unreliable. I don't know what to do with it in this sort of a spot. And those horses are relatively short prices at 7-2 and 4-1. So I wasn't enthralled with those as my top 2 choices. Ultimately, I went to Lorramin. Again, part of it was C2 Stables. C2 Stables is just on fire right now. And this is a horse coming back from a very, brief 2-month layoff, but won last time out against $32,000 optional claiming N2X company, and has been working out very nicely leading up to this race. A 46-4 bullet work on February 22nd, took a little time off after that, and ran a 48 flat 4 furlong work on March 6th. So this one has a lot of speed, can get to the front. I ride Ortiz Jr. up on the mount. I knew I was going to say I ride his name eventually. And I just think this one, the dirt form the last couple of times out has been there. And I think this is a field that is very beatable for lure him in. And so this feels like a good spot for this horse to be in. So ultimately he ended up being my top choice as a horse who can just put himself in a good position, has versatility, can sit just off the pace, doesn't need the lead by any stretch, is a former stakes winner, knows how to win on and off Lasix. There's a lot to like there with this horse who has made the transition from turf to dirt in recent starts. So lure him in is the top pick. My value play almost was the top pick, and that's the number 5, 2 Eagles River. I'm glad they're stretching this horse back out for Mike Maker and Luan Machado. This is a horse that was on the Derby Trail a couple years ago. This is a horse that beat a horse like Disarm and ran against the likes of Verifying and Victory Formation and, Frosted Departure and Red Route 1 and Tumbarumba and Giant Mischief and Surveillance and Gulfport and Cape Trafalgar and Liberal Arts. I mean, these are all pretty good horses that we all are pretty familiar with. Obviously ran in the Grade 1 Arkansas Derby as well against the likes of Angel Empire. So has run against good company. I remember back in last November, got dropped down into $80,000 claiming company and won that race. Then went to Turfway Park, ran second, came back and has caught a wet track the last 2 times out. I do wonder if that might have impacted his effectiveness. Was also at 6 furlongs. Now we're going back to a mile. This horse, I think, is going to be best at a mile. And I just think this 1-turn mile configuration is going to set up really nicely because this is a horse that likes to come from off the pace. And these 1-turn miles tend to have a little too much early speed sometimes. A horse like 2 Eagles River with Machado can sit mid-pack and then make a move. I think at 5-1, this horse presents at least some legitimate alternative value to the favorite in this spot. So 2 Eagles River for me is a horse that I would consider playing if you're going to try to beat the Nest duo, if you're going to try to beat the lure him in C2 Stables, then this one makes a lot of sense. Because I think once you get past him, you have to get maybe a little bit more creative. Maybe you look at a horse like Hey Chief. Maybe you look at a horse like Winston Wolf for Tom Amos and think, maybe those horses are good enough, but they weren't getting it done at Delta Downs. So it's hard for me to think they're going to get it done up here. So we'll just have to wait and see. Well, let's go to one of the 2 stakes races on the card, which is the Virginia Oaks, which is, of course, now a 20-point Kentucky Derby prep race, or Kentucky Oaks prep race, I should say. My top choice in this race is the number 8, Fondly. I'm going to be playing against Gowells Delight, who is your morning line favorite at 3-1 for Kenny McPeak. I really like Fondly. This is a horse that had a terrible debut in terms of finding all sorts of trouble. And typically when you see this horse have this much trouble in debut, you think this horse is going to pack it in, not going to do much running. This horse did the opposite of not a lot of running. This horse did a ton of running And so ended up drawing off that field by 4, despite getting tight inside, despite getting checked and steadied. This one really showed a lot of ability. That was at 7 furlongs. Now that's notable. You win at 7 furlongs. That's a big deal in debut. Now you go and stretch out a little bit longer to a mile and 16th, but we're still staying at 1 turn. This horse has good speed, but can track the pace. I love the post position draw on the outside, jockeyed by Irad Ortiz Jr. I think Irad can judge the early pace scenario, of which there's not a lot of speed, and can see where he wants to sit, work this one over on the backstretch, be in that perfect stalking position, turning for home. I think this is a horse that can absolutely move forward from that 72 Beyer speed figure in debut. And again, also is escaping the inside rail. I always love that, escaping the inside rail in that second start, getting off the rail. Now we're on the outside. The other thing is, hey, the pedigree's there. This is a horse that is the half sibling to last year's Peter Pan winner, Antiquarian. Antiquarian was a horse that was pretty precocious early on, won some big stakes races early on. Fondly, I think, can fall in line with that. So that's one I really like at 7-2. Grand Motion also in the Mid-Atlantic. Got to like that play. Now, in terms of a value play, Icona Mama is a horse that's a little interesting to me. Pennsylvania bred, sired by Maximum Mischief. You know, Flint Stites is the trainer, but you get Johnny Velasquez up on the mount. That's a big jockey upgrade. This is a horse that finished 3rd in the Pocahontas back in September, actually, to Lucara and Liam in the Dust. Those are 2 decent horses. Finished 2nd to a horse like Kimchi Cat, who's a pretty decent horse as well. And based upon that, went to the Frizette. Really was no competition there. Didn't run particularly well doing that 1-turn mile. Went back to Penn National, absolutely smoked the field in a 6 furlong state bred race for fillies, won that. And then last time out went to Laurel and ran 3rd going 7 furlongs. But I think, again, is one who a horse was maybe didn't get the trip it needed, was a little further back, I think, ultimately than she probably needs to be. And this horse that can come from off the pace, but I'd expect Johnny Velasquez to be a little bit more aggressive with this horse out of the gate. Get this horse in a prominent position early. There's not a lot of speed in this race. This one ran a 59-4, 5 furlong work on March 7th. So it signals to me they want this horse to get out there and show a little bit more speed, be a little bit more forward. Nobody's better at that than Johnny. So I think this one at 8-1 in the morning line presents a little bit of value, has been battle tested against some good competition, is a stakes winner, is graded stakes placed. And I think in a field where there's a lot of question marks, this one has at least some boxes that it can check off. So I think Economon 8-1, second back from a 4-month layoff, could be a little bit of an interesting play. I think you could look at a horse like You'll Be Back for Tom Amos. That horse is kind of interesting, stretching out potentially. I know Kaylee Shapiro likes Girl Math a little bit as well. But like I said, I'm going to go with Fondly up top. I think Icona Mama is an interesting underneath play potentially in this race. Well, let's go to the headliner, which is the Virginia Derby, going 1 mile and an eighth, 1-turn configuration again. This is not an easy race, not an easy race. On one hand, you should say, well, Getaway Car is going to go to the lead and never look back. Maybe. And Getaway Car, I think, has been running a lot better than I've been giving him credit for. Last 4 times out, this horse finished 2nd to Citizen Bull, 4th in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, 2nd to Journalism, and won the Sutherland Derby. You can't really knock that in the grand scheme of things. You lose to 2 amazing horses in the Los Al Futurity and the American Pharaoh, and in between, you run a 4th place finish in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, where you do a lot better than Chancellor McPatrick and East Avenue and Jonathan's Way and all these other horses that have a higher name recognition at this point. This horse has outstanding speed for Irad Ortiz Jr. I do always worry about Irad on a speed horse. I also worry about speed horses at Colonial Downs doing a 1-turn, 9 furlong race. Travis Stone tweeted out this great factoid. In all 9 furlong races over the last 5 years, 22% of winners have been gate to wire. In all 9 furlong races at Colonial Downs during that stretch, only 15% of horses have been gate to wire winners. It's harder to win up front when you're doing this 1-turn, 9 furlong dynamic. I also think I wouldn't be shocked if Rapture is pestering this horse, Authentic Gallop is pestering this horse, and if American Promise is pestering this horse from the inside. I think American Promise is the key to the race. If Nick Juarez sends with that horse, then now you could really press a horse like Omaha. We'll get to that horse in a second. Getaway Car quite a bit. Remember, of course, John Hancock is scratched out of this race, and it's going to be going to the Louisiana Derby. So as you're looking over the past performances, that's why I'm not talking about that horse at all. Ultimately, I went to Rapture, the other Brad Cox horse who is staying in this race with Flavian Pratt up. Pratt rode the horse last time, mile and a 16th at Oaklawn Park, beat maidens, did it with the assistance of Lasix, but was able to do it impressively. Now we're switching off Lasix for Cox. Uncle Mo out of a Bernardini mare. There's plenty to like there. Triple Crown nominated. Lost in debut to Vassimo. No disrespect there. And so I think that this is a horse that, is sitting on a potentially nice effort, has been training in South Florida, has good speed, doesn't need the lead, though, can pass horses, and I think can maybe sit right off the flank of Getaway Car and be in a perfect stalking trip to take advantage if that front-end speed is too much to sustain for Getaway Car. So I ultimately went to Rapture. If you want to go with Getaway Car, I get it. The horse is more battle-tested than anybody else in the field, has faced a higher level of competition by far, and really showed a lot of grit and determination winning that Sunland Derby. We're stretching out a little bit longer. But this one, sired by Curlin, though I will say Getaway Car's pedigree underneath is almost all sprint. So it is interesting to see kind of where does this one take its conditioning from. So we'll have to wait and see how it handles the 9 furlong one-turn dynamic. But like I said, Rapture at 5-1. You're not going to get 5-1. I'm thinking closer to 5-2 probably, as John Hancock is scratched. So everybody's going to take a little bit of money. Horse that I will use as a value play in this race. I know Kaylee loves American Promise. So if you watch our Road to the Kentucky Derby, Kentucky Oaks, Kaylee's a big fan of American Promise. That's her top pick in this race. I can't quite get there. I think that maiden breaker might have been a little bit of a fluke. But I will admit this is a jockey upgrade over the last couple of times out. So I do think that's beneficial for American Promise. I ultimately like Omaha, because I think there could be a fair amount of speed in this race. And I think this sort of configuration sets up nicely for horses coming from off the pace. The last couple of times out, Omaha has not gotten the sort of pace he needs to run into. He's been going behind one. He's been sitting behind 113 and change opening fractions to the 6 furlong mark. You're not going to get that. You're going to get much stronger fractions. You're going to get 111 and change, 6 furlong fractions. That's the sort of fractions this horse needs. You look at that race 2 back in the Jerome when he finished second to Cyclone State. That's the trip. And I think this horse can run well. I love the fact that Michael Gorham, the trainer, is sticking with Raul Mania, the jockey. This is a Triple Crown nominated horse who is a Virginia bred, going back to Virginia. So hometown boys made good. And I think the mile and an eighth is not going to be an issue. I think the key here is more of a pace dynamic. The hotter the pace, the better it is for Omaha. I don't know if this horse is fast enough to win. I might defensively include this one on a couple of my tickets, but absolutely a horse that I would be using in my exactas and trifectas. But listen, this is a wide open race if you feel like you can pick up past Getaway Car. Because as much as I have Rapture as my top choice, I'm not sold on Rapture. I'm not taking money to the bank on Rapture. I think Omaha is interesting. I think, Kaylee makes an intriguing case for American Promise. I think, a horse like Calling Card, I think is sitting on a big race. I thought it was last time out, and he made me look like an idiot in the Gotham. Maybe it's this time out. Kenny McPeak's horse, Render Judgment, is getting blinkers on. Maybe that one finally gets the oomph it needs to show a little bit better speed and maybe get up there a little bit closer and be able to get over the top. But like I said, if you can get past the top choice, then this race really opens up quite a bit. And I think Omaha is an interesting horse to include at a little bit of a price. Well, let's go to the final race on the card, which is an $80,000 allowance going a mile and a 16th on the dirt for 3-year-old and up. And we are going to be fading a Jamie Ness horse. We are going to be fading Supreme Law, who is your 6-5 favorite. I would like to read to you a series of numbers. 65, 67, 56, 58, 193. Okie doke. Those are the Spire speed figures for Supreme Law. Now you understand why I'm very hesitant to bet Jamie Ness. This horse has been in Ness's care that entire stretch of races that I just said, 65, 67, 56, 58. The horse drops down to a $15,000 claimer and runs 100 and wins by 26.5 lengths over a muddy sealed track. Then steps up next time out into a $30,000 optional claimer, runs again over a muddy sealed track, going a mile and an eighth, wins by 8 in a 5-horse field. I just don't believe this horse is going to run back to the 100 or the 93. And also the horse, you could argue, might have benefited from a speed favoring track and a wet track the last 2 times out. It's not going to get those conditions. If Michael Sanchez puts this horse up on the front end, there's going to be some company. And I just think that this one could tire late. And you just never know what sort of form you're going to get out of Ness's horses. So as a result, my top pick is Michaelicious for Mike Maker, Lawan Machado up on the mount. This one is an interesting horse, and I really want you to focus on those 3 dirt races from August 2024 to December 2024. That's what you have to focus on with this horse, because I don't know if this horse is really meant for the turf, but has been run on the turf a few times. Horse runs okay on synthetic, but ultimately it's those dirt races from this summer and fall that really stand out. And yes, they were against $50,000 and $80,000 claimers and $50,000 starter allowance, which he won. But I just think this one has those numbers to run back to, and hasn't been running poorly at Turfway Park by any stretch. Has been doing these 1.25 mile races, going a little bit longer, coming from off the pace, has good late speed. I actually like the track configuration for this horse. I think saving all the ground, letting a lot of speed go out in front, making that big run late. I think there's a lot to like with Michaelicious at 6-1. And I think this one could be sitting on a nice effort coming out of Turfway Park. And again, getting back on the dirt surface where this horse has won. In fact, the last time this horse won was over the dirt. And the only 2 times this horse has won has been over a fast track. So I like I said, I like Michaelicious quite a bit here. I think a horse like Passing Game for Peter Urton's potentially interesting if that horse wants to get out up on the front end with Flavian aboard, but it still needs to prove that he can do it against winners. I wasn't sure what to do with Protege, a C2 Stables horse for Sam Walensky with Irad up. Horses 8-1 in the morning line. Wouldn't shock me if this horse won and ran really well. Has some numbers and have some speed figures going back to November and October at Churchill Downs, which would certainly be comparable in this field. Ultimately, though, I went to the far outside, and much like I started talking to you about Jamie Ness, if you're going to give me a Jamie Ness horse at a decent price, I'll consider it. And this is one that I also like. This horse has shown very consistent form since being in Ness's barn. So that's at least a good thing, that I've seen this horse, A, be consistent, and B, show the same sort of running style every time out, which is a really preferred tracking running style. Sitting 3rd or 4th early on in the race, getting a just sense of pace. Now we're going to be going to a 1-turn, 8.5 furlong race. I think that sets up nicely for this horse to sit just off the pace and then make the move. Uncle Mo out of a Streetcar Mare. Again, Jamie Ness and Jamie Rodriguez matching up here, linking up here. 6-1 on Mo Rewards, your number 9. I think it could provide a little bit of value to close out the card on this 10-race Virginia Derby Day card. All right. Well, that's going to do it for me this week. And that's going to do it for Capping the Card. Like I said, it's a favorite heavy card. I think, I tried to kind of explain my logic behind why I think favorites are going to do well in certain legs and why they might struggle in others. If you can find better value, I encourage you to do it. But I also think this is a prime example of a card where you don't want to overthink things too much. So I wish you all the best. Hope it's a profitable day for you at Colonial Downs. Make sure to check out all the great promotions we have up on NYRA Bets. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at NYRA Bets. Make sure to download the app and start playing today if you don't already. My name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.